If you mix with headphones, then you are probably ruining your mix. Let me explain. Now, don't get me wrong, headphones are great for mixing, and there are different scenarios where you probably will want to use headphones instead of studio monitors. And one of those scenarios could be, let's say you are on a long road trip, maybe a 7-hour road trip or a flight even, and you want to mix on the go. Probably you have a deadline you need to meet and you need to, mix. One thing you cannot do for sure is to travel with your monitors, and your best bet is to mix with headphones. Or maybe you're in a noisy environment, or you don't want to disturb your neighbors with noise coming out of your studio monitors. So what you want to do in that case is to mix with your headphones. But in many other scenarios, mixing solely on these guys could be doing more harm to your mixes than good, especially if you've got one of these, closed back headphones like I've got here. So I have here the Audio-Technica ATH M20Xs, and these are great. I have 2 pairs of these. They sound really, really amazing. They sound great. I use them for production, I use them for recording, I use them for mixing as well. But if you mix solely on these guys without referencing on other systems, like a hi-fi Bluetooth speaker or studio monitors or your laptop speakers or your phone speakers and all those other mediums, it could be hurting your mix because these don't necessarily translate accurately across every system. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because in my last video I was doing a tutorial on mixing beats, and what I realized while I was doing that tutorial was that a lot of the sounds that I was mixing, if we are going to jump right into that session in a bit, and you'll find out that there are some elements of the song that I had the faders pulled all the way down, and that's because listening to the mix on these, I felt like, oh, those sounds were still prominent. I wanted to push them into the background quite all right, but I felt like they were still sounding prominent. And the reason I felt that way was because I had these glued to my ears like this, so I was hearing the sound. Even when I was pulling the levels down by a lot, I was still feeling like, oh, the volume is still up front and I need to push it way back. But then when I referenced it on my phone speakers, and when I referenced it on a pair of studio monitors in the proper studio, I realized that I was pulling those sounds way down in the mix, and they were almost imperceivable. I almost could not hear them at all listening to them on my phone or listening to them on a pair of studio monitors. You want to be very careful when you are mixing on studio headphones, especially closed back headphones. So right now we're going to jump back into that video, and like I said in my last video, we're going to finish up with the mixing of that beat, and that's what we're going to do now. And the second thing, very important, that we need to do is correct those balancing mistakes that I made using headphones. This guy almost made me look like a fluke. And that's not going to happen again. All right, so let's get into this video and let's get it cracking, guys. Let's go. For context, I'm going to be playing a little bit of the audio from the last mixing session so we see where we left off. So you can hear how the strings are almost non-existent in this mix, and a couple other sounds as well, a couple other elements. So that's what we're going to try and fix first, rebalance the song. And that's the thing with mixing, nothing is set in stone, or nothing is cast in stone. Or how is it said? Nothing is set in stone? I don't know. But yeah, nothing is, even to the last minute, you are still tweaking and trying to get the perfect balance. So yeah, that's what we're going to do now. We're going to rebalance. So let's bring it up to here. All right, so now that we have a better balance across all the elements, what we want to do now is bus processing. So the next thing we're going to do is group all of the instruments into a corresponding bus. So I'm going to put all of the percussions in a percussion bus, put the bass in a bass bus, and put all the melodies in a melodies bus, and so on and so forth. And what we want to do is process all of these individual elements as groups so that they stand out, they punch through the mix, and they give off more life than they already have. So what I'm going to do right now is quickly group all of them. All right, so now that I have everything in their respective buses and groups, let's go ahead and do some bus processing. So we can see there's a particular sound that's pushing this peak level to come up this loud. And what we want to do first is to clip it, just because of that reason. I want to clip it, make sure that there's nothing going way above, right? Do the clipping first and then do a bus compression after that. So I've pulled up K-Clip 3. You can also use BX Clipper from Plugin Alliance. You can use FL Studio's stock soft clipper or any other clipper that you might have. I chose to go for this one, and that's what we're going to use. So you can see right here that this is the loudest beat, right? So this is what I'm targeting, and this is what I want to, shave off and make sure that it's closer to what these other guys are. Now you can see that we have a little bit more consistent sound, and the signal isn't, we've not changed the way the percussions sound, but we've reduced that peak level. I've decided to clip it first and then compress before we head into saturation if it's needed. Okay, so what I've done here is, because these are percussions, I want to retain the transient. I want to retain that, initial hit of the percussions. I don't want to squash them and make them lifeless. So I'm going for the slowest attack, and here we have it on 30 milliseconds. So this is the slowest attack. And what the slowest attack does is that it allows the initial transients to hit before the compression, sets in. And what I want to do, the aim of this compression is to sort of glue all these percussions together, make them sound like a whole unit instead of different individual random hits, right? So that's what we want to do. So I'm going for the slowest attack. If I find that I'm not achieving what I want to get, I can pull this back to maybe 10 milliseconds of attack time. And then I'm going for a ratio of 3:1. I can also make adjustment to this, and I have the release at 100 milliseconds. That's 0.1 seconds. So I'm going to be dialing this threshold till I'm getting about 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction. Now, another thing that is important is level matching. So yes, we can hear the glue on the drums, but then we can also see that we've pushed up the peak level, and that's not what we want to achieve. We want to maintain the same peak level, but then have this glue and loudness to the drums. So if you look at what we had before, let me take all of them off. Before I introduce the compressor, this is where we were sitting at on the peak level meter. I can see that's just around, minus 14, minus 13, thereabouts, and we want to maintain that. You can see after the compressor, we're pushing all the way up to, minus 9, closer to minus 9. So we have to bring it down back to minus 12, between minus 12 and minus 15. The reason why you always want to level match, going in and out of plugins is simply for the sake of headroom, right? So these peaks are the first things to, especially when you want to start mastering, these peaks are the first things that get to your limiter ceiling. And then if you have really spiky transients and high peak level, you find out that your mastering limiter is going to be doing a lot of compression of those peak levels, and that means that you don't have as much headroom, and you might find that allows you not to push the sound to your desired level. So when you are mixing, you want to make sure that your peak level of your different elements are at a very healthy place, and you have enough headroom so that by the time you push higher and higher into your limiter ceiling, you can get as much volume without triggering the mastering limiter so much. So another thing I'm noticing is that this bass, the peak level of this bass, is not quite at a consistent level. It's, going up and down a little bit. It's kind of inconsistent. So what we want to do is, attack that. So the way we are going to do it is first introduce some sort of saturation, make sure that the bass is beefy, and then see if that helps with the peak level as well. Okay, so I've been able to get a little bit more character from the bass using that saturation plugin, but I'm still not satisfied with where the peak level is sitting at. So what I'm going to do now is introduce compression, and I'm going to use two compressors. I'm going to use the 1176 and the LA2A. Right, so what I want to achieve with that is, with the first compressor, I just want to attack those peaks and just, get those peaks to come down a little bit. And then with the LA2A, I'm going to use that to glue the two bass sounds, that I'm feeding into this bus. I'm going to try to glue them together so they sound more like one big unified bass. So you can see from this, from the way the LA2A is reacting, even at the loudest hits of the bass and at the quiet hits of the bass, it's not compressing beyond 1 dB, and that's because we've been able to use the 1176 to really get a more consistent level. So now the bass is at a consistent level, and then we're getting more life out of the bass. Let's hear before and after all of this processing on the bass bus. So it's sounding more consistent. You can still go in and, tweak some parameters to help get it more consistent. But then I don't want to really squash this sound. It's not a very dense production. So I want to, allow the bass to breathe a little. The difference isn't very much in the dynamic range. So it's not like we have some parts that are very quiet and some parts that are very loud. You can hear all of the bass hits, you can hear them clearly, and, the dynamic range isn't, wildly apart. All right, so now what I want to do is, on the melodies bus, I want to saturate them a little bit, get them to cut through the mix, and also spread them a little bit, wider in the stereo field. Peak level wise, I still feel like the bass is still jumping way up. On its own, it sounds fine, but then I'm comparing it to the percussions because I want the percussions and the drums to be like the loudest, to be the ones responsible for, the highest peak levels, and not, any of the bass, either the bass or the melodies or any of that. So just comparing it to the percussions boss, and then I'm seeing that, it's a little bit on the same level, or sometimes it's even going higher than that. So what I want to do is to still go in there and control those peaks, probably tame them a little bit more using the 1176. All right, so far so good. I think we're getting a very, very good mix so far out of these drums and out of the entire mix. I feel like I still want to push this a little bit more with the reverb. I want to give this a little bit more ambience. Now, so if you listen to this main groove, or if you watch this main groove, you see that I haven't busted anywhere, and that's because of the kick that's in it, right? So normally I should have sent this to, I should have routed this to the percussions bus, but then because it's also housing the kick, and I don't want any of those compression that I've done to affect it. So what I'm going to do with this to make it cut through a little bit more is I'm going to give it its own processing, its own treatment. And the first thing I want to do is introduce the playback style EQ to boost the low end and the high end, give it a little bit more presence and give it a little bit more weight. All right, so what I've done here is I've boosted around 60 hertz. And the thing with the playback style EQ is it's a very broad stroke, type of EQ. So boosting at 60 does not necessarily mean that you're just boosting at 60, right? This 60 band can go all the way up to 500 hertz. So that's why I don't like to, put it at 100, because if you leave it, or if you put it at the 100, you find out that you are boosting maybe all the way up to 1K. Or 1.5K. So sometimes I like to have it at around 30 or around 60 hertz. And then the next thing I did also was to push the highs, boost them by a lot. And then I was checking between, so this is 3K, 4K, 5K, 8K, 10K, 12, and 16K. So I started listening all the way from 3K, 4K, 5K, and I find that where there is a lot more presence and a lot more, bite in the drums is around 8K. So when I got to 8K, I started to pull back on this boost level. Now let's hear it in the context. Now, because I want this particular guy to be the loudest in the mix, I don't necessarily want it also to eat up all of the headroom. So after this, next I'm going to do is to clip it, just shave off the very top end and make sure that the transient is not, pushing and eating up all of the headroom. Now let's listen to the entire mix now and see what we've been able to achieve. All right, the beat is sounding really great, sounding really lively, sounding really interesting. The arrangement, the mixing, everything is sounding quite dope. So now what we want to do is go to the master bus, the stereo out, and do some more processing to bring up the volume one, and then to make sure that the entire mix itself is cohesive, and just everything is gelled together and everything is banging as hard as it can. So I'll just go to the master bus. As you can see, I already have some processing on the master bus. I'm using this to feed to my OBS so that you can hear what is coming out of the DAW, and then I'm also using this as a corrective EQ for these guys. All right, so the first thing I want to do is pull up saturation, of course, and I'm going to be using this for my saturation. All right, so I'm going to be switching out the Waves bus compressor for this bus compressor because I want to be able to have access to this sidechain high-pass filter. The Waves one doesn't have it, this one has it. And what I want to really basically achieve is to compress the entire mix, but then not have the compressor react, solely from the hits of the kick. So I want to be able to do some sidechain high pass all the way up to about 100 or 150, so that it's not primarily listening to the kick when doing this compression. It's compressing across board, but it's not being triggered by the kick. Okay, so now that we have the entire mix sounding really good, sounding, very vibrant and really punchy, what I want to do now is to push up the volume, right, with a limiter, push up the volume and get it to a certain loudness so that you can, put it out on your beat store, put it out on YouTube, and then get people to listen to it at a very, very competitive level, have it punch and really, bang and get people dancing and on their feet and wanting to purchase your beats. All of this is to make sure that people like the song enough to want to buy the beat. Okay, so from what I can see, with the Yulin, we are hitting around, minus 14 or minus 16 rather integrated, and this reading might not necessarily be accurate. So if you want to get a more accurate reading, you'd have to play the song from the start all the way up or all the way to the end for you to get a more accurate reading. But what I'm targeting for this mix is to hit around, minus 10, minus 9 integrated LUFS. So now we can see that using our limiter, even when we've gotten to that threshold, we're still not hitting those numbers. So what I want to do is to clip and shave off the excess peaks and excess, all the excess peaks first, shave them off, then that helps the limiter to act a little bit more better, and that gives us more room to push into the ceiling of the limiter. So you can see from bringing in a clipper, we've been able to gain a little bit more headroom. You can see where the entire bit is peaking at now. So we still have this much headroom to push the limiter more and get more loudness out of it. All right, so let's play the beat, from the beginning, and let's see if we'll get a more accurate reading on the integrated LUFS.
A few inches later.
So far, I've been able to play the song all the way from the beginning to the end, and what I realized is at the loudest moments we're getting -12 LUFS, and that's actually not far away from -10, but then that's not our target of -10 LUFS. So what I also observed was that the transients, the peak levels are still quite spiky, and they are getting to the limiter ceiling before the rest of the sounds, or before the rest of the elements in the mix. So what we want to do in that scenario is to go into the individual buses and make sure that we clip all those elements, make sure that they are not exceeding a certain point. Probably we can target -6 or -9, depending on how loud the individual buses are. So that's it. That's how you get to mix a beat from beginning all the way to the end, and get it to slap, get it to bang, and really come out sounding nice. If you liked this video, please be sure to leave me a like, drop a comment, and as well subscribe to this channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, please leave that in the comment section below. Thank you very much for sticking by, and I'll see you in the very next video. Cheers.